It's now my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening. And please keep enjoying your pie and coffee and wine. And we have more after the speaker for you to eat. Dr. Carolyn Wu is President and CEO of Catholic Relief Services, the official international humanitarian agency of the Catholic community in the United States. She came to CRS in January 2012 after a distinguished academic career. CRS was founded in 1943 by the Catholic bishops of the United States to serve survivors of World War II in Europe. Since then, it has become one of the world's largest and most respected international relief and development agencies, each year reaching more than 130 million people in nearly 100 countries. Before coming to CRS, Dr. Wu served from 1997 to 2011 as Dean of the University of Notre Dame's Mendoza College of Business. During Dr. Wu's tenure, the Mendoza College was frequently recognized as the nation's leading business school in ethics education and research, and received top ranking in 2010 and 2011 for its undergraduate business program from Bloomberg Businessweek magazine. Prior to the University of Notre Dame, Dr. Wu served as an Associate Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs at Purdue University. Dr. Wu was born and raised in Hong Kong and immigrated to the United States to attend Purdue University, where she received her BS, MSIA, and PhD degrees. She became a member of the faculty. Her teaching, research, and administrative leadership have been recognized through Best Paper Awards by the Academy of Management, selection as one of the 40 Young Leaders of American Academe by Change Magazine, distinguished alumna and honorary alumna by Purdue University and the University of Notre Dame, as well as by the conferral of honorary doctorates from Providence College, the University of St. Francis, Lewis University, as well as the University of Notre Dame. She was the first female dean to chair the accreditation body for the business schools, AACSB, and directed its initiative for peace through commerce. From 2004 to 2010, Dr. Wu served on the board of directors for Catholic Relief Services, and she currently serves on the board of directors for Aon Corporation, NiSource, Catholic Charities USA, Aileron Foundation, the Board of Regents, University of Portland, the Board of Governors, University of Notre Dame, Australia, Archdiocese of Baltimore Independent Child Abuse Review Board, and many, many other great distinctions. She also serves as a member of the Executive Committee of the Advisory Board Fuel Up to Play 60, sponsored by the National Football League and the National Dairy Council. And she helped launch the Principles of Responsible Management Education for the United Nations Global Compact Program and the Diversity Advisory Board of KPMG. Dr. Wu is married to Dr. David E. Bartkus, and they have two sons, Ryan and Justice. Please help me welcome Dr. Wu.
Thank you very much. It's like a family reunion. I saw so many old friends, and some of the people now who have wonderful positions who were in PhD programs a while back. Great to see some of you. It's just really a wonderful, wonderful invitation, even though you asked me to do something which I'm philosophically opposed, and that is I never wanted to stay for after-dinner speeches. I always wonder whether it is acceptable if I disappear after the food. And so I don't want to inflict on you, a burden here. It's just a great privilege to be back. I want to say I hear that John Allen did a good job, great job actually. And I don't know if he is still here. Is he still here? No? And one of my bane is that I have to follow a lot of very good speakers. So today was John Allen, and he had his both wonderful content, wonderful delivery, and very funny. And I'm not funny because I couldn't even understand the jokes myself. There's several times when I follow people. One time I follow a guy who could sing, and I couldn't sing. And Another time I had to follow Father James Martin, who is a Jesuit, And if you're going to Washington, D.C. next summer, you should have him, but please do not have anyone follow him. Because he's a true comedian, actually, and he's supposedly Stephen Colbert's chaplain or something like this. So I don't have those gifts. So I'm going to make my talk actually brief. That is my gift to you, and that is do not inflict suffering for overly long, just a short duration. When I read the topic for this, to inform, form, and transform, and I thought, my gosh, what do I know? This is a group of experts. This is, you went to school to learn how to do this, and most of you have done it in your jobs, and you lead the functions that do this. But I actually don't, I said, I'm not an expert, but the only comfort is, well, they weren't smart enough to get an expert, so, here I am. And when you are not an expert, you can say whatever you want to say. But honestly, before I start, I just want to recount two things. One is from my own experience as a student. I was at a retreat. I think I was a sophomore at that point. The speaker was Daniel Berrigan, Father Daniel Berrigan of the Chicago 8. And some of you may be old enough to remember him of that point of the peace movement. And of course, at that point, he was considered a rebel. He came to a retreat. He was actually a man of tremendous peace, very soft-spoken, very quiet. And at one point, we were talking about taking risk. I said, oh, you worry about all the things you could lose, the positions you take, and so on. And in his very quiet way, he said, that will always be difficult. But when you are a student with nothing to lose, and you're already afraid of losing, you will never learn not to be afraid. Right? And the fact that I heard this when I was a sophomore, and I still remember it today, give you a sense of how powerful that reminder was. And it's been sort of a question that I've gone back to over and over again. And this is this thing where you think you have so much to lose, do you really? And when will you learn how to sort of stand for something bigger than what you're afraid of losing? So that was, for me, a formative experience. I come from Hong Kong. I tend to be very pragmatic. The second story I want to recount is a student we had. Father Mark Poorman and I created a course called the Character Project. We were actually traveling to the University of Portland. And on the plane, we started talking about the fact that we didn't really like ethics courses. They are fine. But the most difficult sort of ethical breaches and so on is not the people who go to jail. It's really sort of the day-to-day temptations that you have to deal with. And sometimes you succumb to those temptations, and sometimes you even tell yourself it's okay, and so on. So from that, we started this course that ran about 8 years, the Character Project, and it's really about formation. And I will draw a little bit more on it in my talk, in my points. But one of the outcomes was we had a student. We only allow 16 to 20 students, half male, half females, into the class, and it's a 1 semester long of continuous conversation, 3 hours every week. And so at the end of this, we have this student. He was very bright. He had already been accepted into medical school. And he said, and this is to the class, when he applied to medical schools, some schools didn't take him. And he thought perhaps the reason now, looking back with this course experience, was that he was inauthentic. His line, he said, I thought everybody give this line, is when people ask you, why do you want to go to medical school? The right answer is because I want to help people. And he said, yeah, I do want to help people. I'm going into a helping profession. But he said, I come from a family with very little means. My reason for going to medical school is that looking at my interests as well as my desire for a well-paying job, medicine is just right, you know. And he said that was it. You know, I do want to help people, but I want to make a good living. And he said, you know, I wonder whether people picked up that I wasn't sincere. And he said, because I have given that answer so many times, I am going to take a year of deferral from medical school, and I'm going to go do service, because I just don't want to be a liar. And if I've made that statement now, I am going to go do 1 year of service. And I think that sometimes that's what formation is about. It's not in anything necessarily profound, but you can see in this young man a sense of self-assessment, that he picked up a trait about himself, and that he was not sincere, that he learned to give a line without that line really being owned by him. And the second thing he wanted to do then is to make good on that particular behavior. So I just want to start with those two anecdotes. I'm going to limit my speech to 10 points. I decided that if God could give the Israelites 10 commandments and set them off on their life, that no one needs to have an 11th point. 10 would be just fine. So I am going to share 10 points with you. But when I thought about the topic formation, I could go on and on and on. I could tell you about my course. But actually, the most basic questions came to me. And that is, when we talk about formation, there must be 3 primary questions. One is, what are we working with in that formation? And the second question is, what do we want to form it into? You know, as you're shaping, you know, which is what formation is, or somebody is doing the shaping, what is sort of the destiny or the outcomes that we're looking for? And then the third question is, how do we enable that formation to take place? So my 10 points are organized by those 3 categories. What are we working with? Where are we hoping to go with it? And how do we do it? I'm going to start with number 2, and that is, where are we headed with this formation? I think that is the easiest part. I think it's not necessarily controversial. And for me, not necessarily for you, and not necessarily in the literature, since I don't know what the literature is about. For me, I think that there are 4 types of attributes that we look for when I've taught, when we deal with the character class, as the Dean of the Mendoza College of Business, in terms of how we set the tone of our curriculum, what we want for our students. There were 4 things that were important to me. The first one was integrity. We actually have an executive leadership program which is called Integral Leadership. And the whole idea of integral character, integral integrity. And to me, integrity is really the sense of being aligned, internal and external. Who we think we are, what do we tell people who we are, and how we act. Is really integrity, is the alignment between internal and external. And I think that is so very important. I think that's what our students pick up, that who is and what he said he is really didn't align. So the first thing I want to see in that formation as we develop our students is really integrity. The alignment between who we say we are, what we want to project to the outside world, and what we actually end up doing. The second thing is actually slightly different, and it's character, which is the character project. So for example, integrity, you could say, you know, I really don't like to study. Let me just now tell people, I really don't want to do this. And then that is a lie. I don't want to give a lie. But character is about a consistent pattern, a habit of doing things which are virtuous. Right? In fact, we lead our students, the first part of the course is looking at who they say they are, and they go through then a long survey to say how they actually choose, and let them see the alignment or the lack of alignment between who they say they are and what they actually do. And there are simple things such as when you ask them in the integrity questions, getting at the integrity is, what are the 3 attributes most important to you? And they would say honesty. But then there is a whole series of questions when you run into a situation when your roommate engages in very destructive, very promiscuous behavior, damaging behavior. What would you say? They would say nothing. And or if they're going to say something, they're going to say, don't you think this is a little bit unhealthy for you? And so for them, or another thing is they want to be really good to their friends. They never want to let them down. But a lot of times students stand other people up and they make a lie and then stand people up, and that way they don't hurt their feelings. But actually they have not been honest nor have them been loyal. So the first part of it is really getting people to understand sort of, you can't say, in our culture we do say, I play the piano, but I'm not a pianist. I'm a runner, but I'm not an athlete. But then we begin to say, I lie, but I'm not a liar. I don't do this except when I'm drunk, as if then we're therefore let ourselves loose. So the whole part, the first part is really what you do, you got to eventually own that as part of yourself. Character is the next step. Character then is therefore understanding the power of habits, and that we are on a slippery slope. And its ability to constantly cultivate, we're not perfect, but the ability to cultivate that type of habit that allows a virtue to really stand. And that becomes something which is more sustainable, which is part of the character. And so the second part that we want our students to be aware of is sort of that they are on a slippery slope, that they need to make that constant commitment. And in fact, one of the interesting things in business is that Warren Buffett one time said that we try to toe the line. Everybody kind of try to toe the line, but the line keeps slipping. And so the whole question is, how did a society allow the line to slip? Why does it matter that the line slip? And what is that collective, sustainable, repeated behavior that caused the line to slip continuously? So that's the second point, which is about character, which is holding oneself to a habit. Habit is developed over time, and is a habit which is virtuous, which then leads to character. The third thing which is important for us in the business school, and to me was always that Notre Dame was not just another business school, but it was a business school where we believe God is present, and where we believe that everything that we have, all of our blessings come from God. We believe that His invitation to us to take care of each other is not optional. And we also want our students to know that what they are asked to do, the courage that they're asked to demonstrate, the ethics that they are asked to keep, the line that they're supposed to toe, that all of those things don't just depend on them, that they need to have a sense of God, they need to have a sense of the Holy Spirit, because otherwise who would be strong enough as a person to say, I'm standing up to the establishment or whatever it is. So the third thing was really in our engagement with our students, and this is just in the business school, is that it is very important that the sense of God be real to them. Otherwise, the anchoring place, as well as the place of courage, the internal feeding of it, will not be strong enough. The fourth thing, which a lot of times I think people do not pay enough attention to, and that is the capacity and the agency for taking actions and for being able to really do something, the ability to really participate in society in a positive way. I see very few universities, including Catholic universities, for example, really helping students to know how they could do advocacy. If there are particular policies, legislations, practices, and so on, which are unjust, do they know how to use that voice? I actually call this, borrowing from GE. GE have something called eco-imagination. I think this is action imagination, that it is not just enough to cultivate people to think the right thoughts, to have good habits, but that it is important for our students who are the brightest of its generation, who are so blessed with the incredible education that all of you are giving them, that their sense of how their action could really make a difference is not as strong. So that is the sense, the fourth part, which is from integrity, which is owning your action, to character, which is developing long-term sustainable habits of virtue, to faith, which is kind of the engine and the spirit that allows you to know that all you do does not depend on you, and all you do actually comes from God. And the fourth thing, therefore, is to be able to imagine action much more explicitly. So that's sort of the what are we headed for, at least for me, in education. The third point then is, what are we working with? What is it that students bring to us that we could work with? The first point, I know a lot of times I could use the word like optimism. I actually don't know whether our students are more optimistic than they were in the past, so I actually avoided that word. Another word that came to mind that I rejected was sort of naivete. And that is the whole sense that they haven't really been burned a lot. Perhaps they therefore have a much more sort of positive view of the world. And I didn't think that was totally correct either, because sometimes I think our students have seen a lot. I actually rephrase this as sort of an unencumbered canvas. They're starting new in their life. They're starting new in their professional life, in their adult life. They know a lot of the things which are wrong, but they could attribute all of those actions to their parents, to the generations before them, to their government, to the lack of leadership in institutions, to the people who were greedy, to the people who didn't care about them, to the people who messed it up, which is whether it's the environment or the economy. Our students are not encumbered with that past. Whatever state we are in, they were not responsible for the state of society. And so they have an unencumbered canvas. They haven't made a lot of investment on that canvas. That picture is not well formed. Look, when you start drawing a landscape, it's hard to change it into a portrait. When you have already used a lot of your space for whatever picture you have, it's hard to really change the overall composition of that picture. So I think where our students are starting at is that their canvas is not encumbered by their past. Their canvas is not encumbered by a lot of quote-unquote sunk investments as adults are. And I think therefore there is a bigger space for possibilities. They could look at things without as much bias, I think. They still have sort of the degrees of freedom to exercise in their choice. And I think that allows, not always, but sometimes allow people to have broader options, more open mind, more able to possibly say, I could do this, I could do that, I could, and so on and so forth. And I think that is a gift for young people. So I think that that is what they do bring to us, to help them draw on that canvas. And I also want to say, for anybody who's done research in an academic setting, actually having an empty canvas and a blank canvas is a very intimidating process. There are a lot of people who couldn't really start their research because onto that canvas, you just feel like I couldn't put anything there. Whatever I could put there would not be worthy. But anyway, that's one thing they bring. But they did bring two things which I think are very powerful and of deep concern to me. And I don't think you see necessarily as much of this in the private schools, the more wealthy schools. But I think one thing that students are bringing to us young people is profound, profound insecurity. Everything I read, as I encounter people in different sectors, I have different friends whose children have graduated and so on, there is a sense of like, I don't know where my place is in this society. And I think that that profound insecurity, the lack of a sense of belonging, they don't know where they belong. They're not on track. If you say that there is a ladder, they don't know where the bottom rung is. They don't see it. They feel like the ladder is pulled out for them. And so there is this sense, I think economically is true. They have seen sort of the unemployment rate at about 8%. It's about 12% actually for young people. They have seen their parents lost jobs. A lot of surveys, the majority of young people say they know at least one, if not two parents who have lost jobs. They have seen their parents lost savings. They themselves have a lot of debt. And so this deep insecurity, one thing is from the macro environment. But it's not just right now they don't know what to do. They can't see themselves on a future track. They have no plans for marriage or having children. A lot of people say they want to postpone that. They couldn't see how their lives come together, so they don't want to engage in those. Those are very deep sense of sort of social withdrawal of a sense. And so there is this deep sense of that insecurity. Other thing is on a personal level, not just on an economic level, but at the personal level, there is the effect of scarcity. Scarcity does make you feel like you have to compete harder, but there's overall, in a sense, that people, the whole internet is to force you to create an identity. And it allows you the space to create your identity, the friends that you have, what do you say about yourself, and so on. But deep down, there is a whole sense of sort of like, there is an identity which would be more attractive, more appealing to other people than just simply me, And so there, on a personal level, the feeling of competition, the feeling of not mounting up, the feeling that there's so many other people who have so much more, that is another point of that insecurity. And actually, when we work with our students in this character course, and these students especially chosen, they also reflect a lot of insecurity. A lot of times when they start talking about why they do certain things in a way that they shouldn't, they know they shouldn't, they were not proud of themselves, and it's always about acceptance. They're afraid that if they really step up and say, well, I don't have this, or really, I made a mistake or whatever it is, or if I don't go to this party, I will never be invited again. There is just this sense, even for our own students, the need, the fear of always sort of like not being at the top of the pile, and their